Throughout history, cultures across the globe have told stories about them, from the Americas all the way to China. Civilizations have reported sightings and encounters for thousands of years. They are often described as humanoid-type creatures that are of little stature. Some cultures, like Mexico, report them as malevolent or evil creatures that will steal your children in the night, while other cultures portray them as benevolent beings that help Santa bring toys to children across the globe. They are referred to by many different names, from elves to duendes to gnomes. But one thing they seem to have in common is that they all report that there are 3 different types of little people, each of them uniquely having their own lore and legends. Some are just 12 inches tall, while others are up to 3 feet. Some are described as having wings, others magic. I can tell you that if you encounter one in nature, just turn and walk away, pretending you never saw them, because if you try and sneak a peek, you may end up being their dinner. The people of one place in particular know this all too well, from children disappearing to strange lights moving across the tundra at night. They have some of the most intriguing lore I've heard to date, especially the natives of the region, the Inuit and the Yupik. Depending on the tradition or the tribe, what they call them varies, but most commonly they are referred to as the Innukin. The Innukin are described as being 1 to 3 feet in height. Oftentimes, they're wearing animal skins. They have pointed heads and elven-like ears. They mostly stay underground or in the mountains during the day, only venturing out at night. Residents characterize them as being ill-tempered, mean, and mischievous little creatures who love to torment people. Lore says that they enjoy getting travelers lost, and they'll even throw rocks at them. Hunters complain about getting their kills stolen, especially caribou, one of their favorites. They are even claimed to be hunters themselves, relying on primitive technologies for weapons, like bows and arrows. At their most malevolent, they are known to abduct women and children, dragging them away, never to be seen again. It is believed by some that they have supernatural abilities, like going invisible, shape-shifting, or causing confusion of the mind. But the most talked about of these abilities is their superhuman strength. It's said that they can carry an entire caribou by themselves. According to an Inuit tribe member, Alaskan pilots often report seeing caribou running sideways, parallel to the ground. So naturally, they fly lower to investigate the strange occurrence, only to find an Innukin. What is up, my Night God people? Merry Christmas. I hope you all are having a wonderful morning. I wasn't planning on posting this video, but I figured with the holiday spirit, I better give you guys a Christmas present from myself. So recently, a follower hit me up on Facebook. He is a descendant of the Inuit tribe of Alaska. He told me that I need to do a story on the Alaskan Gnome. At first I was kind of reluctant because I thought I had covered most of the legend and mythology surrounding the duendes. But when he started telling me about the lore of the Alaskan Gnome, I had never heard anything like it. It was absolutely intriguing. So I started doing a little research. What I found? Nothing short of mind-blowing. There are so many different accounts from so many different people describing them in a number of different ways. Some of them have abilities, some powers, some good, some evil. Where they live, what they eat, how they hunt, their shape-shifting abilities. Supposedly, they can even manifest portals into the sides of mountains. And the people reporting these encounters varied from children to grown adults, men who were hunting, and women who were almost abducted. Some encounters were actually positive experiences. They really didn't say anything bad about them, while others were the exact opposite. So stick around, you're going to want to hear them, and make sure you do the usual. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you get notified every time I post. That way you don't miss out on my awesome content. Also, I'm going to roll out an older video after this one on the 3 types of duendes to inhabit Earth. And this account is consistent with cultures across the globe. Most generally, and almost always, they reference 3 types of duendes. The main source of this information is from a friend of mine whose grandfather lived in Mexico near the 7 luminaries. So this lore dates back thousands of years, from generation to generation, all the way back to the Aztecs. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for that, especially you new subscribers. This video went hella viral on TikTok, so I know you're going to enjoy it. Again, I hope y'all are having a very Merry Christmas and enjoying time with family on this holiday, because ultimately, that's what it's about. But I'm sure y'all want to get to the video, so I'm done stalling. This is the legend of the Alaskan Gnome. The following is how one Inuit native describes the Inukkin. The Alaskan little people live in the old ways to this day. They dress in caribou skins that they hunted with a bow and arrow. They live underground and in caves. They possess superhuman abilities that most would never believe. Not only do they have superhuman strength, but they are very, very fast. They like to sneak into the villages at night and steal food and supplies from the villagers. When a hunter shoots and kills a caribou, it always requires 2 Inuit men to carry them and put them on the sled, while it only takes 1 Inukkin to pick it up over its head and run with it. Experienced native hunters of the region have shot and killed caribou dead, only to approach, get ready to field dress it, but they have already disappeared. Make no mistake, the tribe member explained, these people are good in what they do. They are some of the best hunters in the world. So I gotta say, it's interesting how cultures across the globe have similar accounts of these beings. For example, almost every culture tries to avoid them and describes them as prankish, mischievous little creatures. They are known for tormenting people by doing things like stealing items and making you think you lost them, and in more extreme cases, they are said to even take children. In cultures like Mexico, parents won't even let their children out at night because that is when they do most of their evil bidding. This actually parallels with some lore in America from the people that live near the Appalachian Mountains. I've seen multiple testimonies online from adults who grew up in these cultures, and they all state the same thing. They weren't allowed as children to go out at night. And of course, that was because there was a fear of them being kidnapped by creatures, or a lot of times gnomes, that live in the area or in the woods. But on the flip side of that coin, there are also a number of accounts of people who had actually decent encounters with the Inukkin. For example, in Alaska, it is known that when they are feeling generous, they may give you a gift, and that's considered to be good luck. There are even rare occasions where they have pity or empathy for a soul lost in the woods, and they have actually guided them out. So with anything, it's easy to conclude that there are both good and evil duendes. At the end of the day, it depends who you talk to and what type of experience they've had with them. This next account seems like it was neither good nor evil. I'll let you decide. Regardless, it's one of the most interesting testimonies I've ever heard. This hunter claims that one day, while he was out stalking a caribou, he heard a strange noise. Perplexed, he started to follow it, only to walk up on an interesting scene. He believes what he found was a portal in the side of a mountain, through which he could see the Inukkin dancing. And after watching this celebration for what he stated was a short period of time, he decided to go back to his sled. But when he arrived at his sled, everything seemed to have aged due to the elements. Even the caribou that he had just shot completely rotted away. Confused, he made his way back home, only to find out from family that he had been gone for over a year. That story in particular is common mythology in the region, but most residents will tell you that it is no myth at all. The next encounter was even reported in the Anchorage Daily News. A hunter from Marshall named Nick Andrew Jr. was out on a snowmobile around May 7th hunting fowl when he stumbled upon a young boy out in the middle of the marsh. When he approached the boy, he seemed to be in some sort of trance or daze. He remembers noting to himself that it was odd there were no tracks around him. Asking other snowmobilers was no help at all, because he seemed to have just appeared out of nowhere. After getting his attention, Nick asked him where his parents were, but it was obvious he was upset and had no idea. Concerned, he of course decided to help the little fella, so he took him back to the village and attempted to locate his parents. This is when things would get even more bizarre. After a while, he started to come back to his senses and remember what had happened. He claimed that he had been abducted by the little people and taken to nearby Pilcher Mountain. Now it's good to note that Pilcher Mountain is well known for Inukkin sightings. So it was at Pilcher Mountain where he was held captive, along with a little girl, who apparently had disappeared in the area almost 40 years earlier. He said that the Anukin eventually decided to let him go, and that's when they dumped him in the marsh. Authorities would say the boy displayed classic symptoms of lost time, and could not lead them back to exactly where they had taken him. So I hate to do this to you guys, but I'm going to end it there. I may do a part 2. I think I have enough content, but it's not 100% yet. Regardless, you're going to get 8 more minutes of video of just as good a content about the duendes. So Merry Christmas from me. I hope you all enjoy. I hope you all got what you wanted. And of course, thank you, Night God family. Y'all gave me the best gift anybody could ask for. But enough of that stuff. Next, we have the 3 types of duendes to ever inhabit Earth. Hope you enjoy, and always remember, sometimes truth can be stranger than fiction. A while back, a gentleman from Cali hit me up. He would tell me his grandfather came from the 7 luminaries in Mexico, and he would share stories with him that went back generations. These stories are amazing. He would tell of tales from ETs to giants. But his most recent one talked about duendes. If you don't know what duendes are, they're little people. And the tales of these little people run deep into Mexican folklore. And the following is what his grandfather told him about them. He would explain that there are 3 types of duendes that inhabited Earth. The first type were the largest. They were around the same height as the average 7-year-old, so 3 to maybe 4 feet. They lived near wetlands and would resemble goblins. They weren't necessarily inherently good or evil. His grandfather would explain that once in a while, they would steal livestock from local farmers. Before we continue, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow. But much to the farmer's surprise, just a short time later, they would receive something. It would be a barter. These duendes would later bring back baskets full of fruit. These fruits were extremely rare, and that's how they'd know it was from the duendes. They were the only ones who were able to attain them. They would also leave things like mushrooms that grew specially in the forests, or bread and cheese that nobody else knew how to make. And really, they were okay with it because they loved the stuff. So it would more or less become commonplace among the farmers when one of their livestock would disappear, they would wait for a gift. And they would know that it was this particular duendes based on the gift. So yes, they would steal, but they would pay it back later on. And there's another interesting story that goes along with these duendes. Apparently, one of the villages that they lived near had a girl who fell in love with one of them. And shortly after falling in love with one of these green duendes, she would disappear. Her father was devastated. He would gather the entire village to go looking for her. But unfortunately, she was nowhere to be found. Assuming she had lost her life, her father would grieve for weeks. Until one day, he heard a knock at the door. It was late, so he wasn't used to receiving guests at this particular time. Curious as to who it could be, he would get up and go open the door. As he opened the door to see what was out there, his eyes would widen. Sitting in front of him would be a pile of gold, unlike anything he has ever seen. He would instantly grin, knowing what it was about. The lore states that after his daughter had joined these duendes, the one she married was the king, making her the queen. And she, along with her king, would rule over this particular duendes community. They inhabited a beautiful underground city. So after the girl from the village fell in love with this particular type of duendes and left, her father, who thought her dead, would get a pile of gold. He knew why, but he'd never see his daughter again. It is rumored that this type of little people had a vast underground city that was magical, and a population that was quite significant. The lore states that so many years after she disappeared, there was another type that started showing up to the village. They would show up to trade and barter with their particularly rare goods. This type of duendes was a little taller, pale-skinned, and they were very beautiful. It would become commonplace to spot them in the village every so often, bartering or trading goods. But for some reason, the locals would never approach them because they looked a little different, so they were afraid. But it is believed they were the queen and the king's offspring. His grandfather would also state that though these weren't necessarily malevolent beings, after the girl in the village would disappear and become their queen, they would notice a change in their behavior. Suddenly, the men of the village that were known to be womanizers or hurt children would start showing up, beaten and battered. And if they continued their ways towards their women or children, they would literally just disappear. So the lore would state that this was because of the queen. She would order their warriors to watch over the village, especially the women and children. And if you didn't do or act right towards them, you knew that your time would come. This would continue for decades. But one day, all evidence of them would just disappear. The village would never see or hear from this type of duendes ever again. And virtually nobody knew what happened to them. This brings me to the second type. The second type of duendes were about the size of a cat. These beings were usually malevolent or evil. They lived in small groups, which usually consisted of family, and they would inhabit the woods. But as always, of this evil type of little people, there was a small fraction of them that weren't. They were inherently good and one with Mother Earth, so this gave them amazing powers. His grandfather would say that they could actually control the weather. They could make it rain, snow, or make it thunder. But afterwards, they would open the sky up to a beautiful sunshine, and this would result in the most elaborate rainbows you could ever see. It's said they thoroughly enjoyed rainbows like leprechauns. The locals would never have any trouble with this good faction of leprechaun or duendes, but the bad ones, they would always have trouble with. The evil ones were known for kidnapping their children and stealing their livestock. So after these evil cat-sized duendes would steal one of their livestock or children, the ancient natives would get angry. So they would train one of the purest breeds of dogs they had to hunt them. And once they had their scent, it was on. The dogs would eventually sniff them out, and they would capture them alive. Upon their capture, they would bring them to the local medicine man or shaman. These ancient beings were so in tune with Mother Earth that they would say a prayer to her, and the captured duendes would turn into a pile of gold. Either that, or they would turn into beautiful fruits and vegetables of much rarity. This was Mother Nature thanking them for ridding her of these evil beings. I believe these duendes to actually be leprechauns. And like any faction, they had good ones and bad ones. This brings me to the third type of duendes. This type of duendes was mostly good, but again, they had some that were bad. They were 6 to 9 inches tall and had beautiful cities in the forest. They lived like royalty. Their warriors even had wings, much like fairies, while the rest of them were just normal. These were the smallest of the duendes, and they lived in dense forest, surrounded usually by beautiful flowers. But some of them would eventually leave the forest and inhabit human homes. They would make their abode either in the basement or even in the walls of the home. These were the duendes that liked mischief. They would often tease the homeowners by stealing items that they knew they needed, causing them to think they misplaced them when they really didn't. They would get a kick out of it, but this is usually as far as the mischief went, unless you actually killed one of their people. If you kill one of theirs, it angers them, and they will come after you. Suddenly, you will start seeing dangerous things take place in the dwelling. Most of the time, the homeowner would believe it to be an accident, but in reality, it's on purpose. They will attempt to hurt both you and your loved ones, but make it look like an accident. Now, on the other hand, if you know they exist and you're cool with them, you'll be good. In fact, they will like you, and they will help you when they can. And they'll do so, you not even knowing it's them. Things like leaving money in your pocket, finding items that you may have lost, even so much as filling refrigerators. It's said if you capture one and make them your friend, you can carry them around and they'll help you. The ancient natives would allow them to inhabit their gardens, because not only would they keep the bugs out, but they would make them beautiful and keep them spotless. They could even grow fruits for you that would make you float. Hope you enjoyed. Like and follow for more interesting content.